What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This week I'm back for a new video and this time I have Mathys Lenne. So for this one, his tracks and style ranges from deep techno, sometimes more hypnotic and also some more groovy stuff. I've been using his recent track on Mutual Rhythm as a reference, especially Vol de Nuit and Enfer au Ciel. As usual, you can get the project file in the link in the description. Thank you guys so much for the support and now let's get into it.
Tout s'éloigne, tout se rapproche.
So I'm gonna show you first the kick bass, and this is how it sounds. So it's something pretty deep, with some noise and sine wave, this type of stuff. So I'm gonna show you these different layers. As usual, I have lots of group processing, so without it, sounds like this. So let me show you the different layers. So first of all, I have this kick punch, and this one is just an 808. I feel like sometimes in this type of track, there's not so much punchy mids, and it's more like just a sub like this. So that's why I've used an 808. So for this one, I just saturate it a little bit, and I give it a slight, well, quite some reverb on it, but with a pretty short decay, and I make sure I don't have lows on this one. It's gonna give a bit more room and wideness, and also I think with that reverb it kind of fills up the frequency spectrum. Next up, I have this little transient, and this one is just to give that tiny transient at the start of the kick. So not too much mids, but just like the high end, and gonna give it, and it's just the same type of processing, just the reverb and just an EQ. Don't have any sub. Then I have some noisy ambience, and to do that, what I did is I took a hi-hat. You can warp it, use the transient and like put it down, or you can use the faders and really put it down also, and then you can just bounce it and you're gonna get a grain like this. And then it's just lots of reverb, and just put some sidechain to don't have this little click, or you can keep it if you prefer. And what I use here is this endless smile, and it's gonna give really that grainy, very airy kind of reverb, plate reverb. And so as you can see, I heavily EQ because I don't want the lows, and I don't want like this part in the mids. That's gonna be too much and it's gonna clash with the rest. Here I just want that tiny airy reverb. So very long reverb with the endless smile, then sidechain to don't get the click from the closed hi-hat, and then I also use compression to withdraw any kind of attack actually, and then just some final EQs so that it doesn't sound too harsh. So this is a noisy kind of ambience. Then I have this, which is another kind of ambience. Yeah. Here's the same thing. Actually, I'm using the FX Subverb that I'm gonna use as the rumble. So you have here just this rumble. It's a sample from Ableton, and I just use here. And I make sure it's the right fit, so I can align the phases between those two. I sidechain, of course, and it's gonna kind of continue that kick 808 tone. And this one is just the other part of the FX Subverb. It's just the high end, and I use it here with a big reverb to kind of make also some room. And this time it's more on the mid frequencies, but I want to EQ and sidechain, especially for the punch. And then everything is gonna sound like this. So you also have the sine. So for the sine, I have the basic subsine preset, which is from Ableton also. And here I'm just creating a random pattern with the snake sequencer. So I put random gates, so I try different kind of sequence. I can also change the velocity if I want, and I can also choose the scale here. So I was in E Phrygian, and then I can just randomize, and it's gonna play random notes until I get a groovy rhythm that I like. And then what I want to do is EQ, especially here, I don't want the sub, which is already given by the FX Subverb, the rumble. I also want something dark and deep. So here, I just want to make sure I don't go too far away here because it's gonna sound a bit too clear. So that's why I EQ like this. Of course, I sidechain for the kick, and I have another kind of bass here. Here it's just one note like this. It's also a preset from Ableton, and this one is going through a little bit of reverb, also a slight delay to get a bit of room, and sides, and then sidechain EQ, of course. And to make it even more deep, a bit distorted and a bit tamed, especially in the high frequencies, I'm gonna use this overdrive. So altogether, sounds like this. And then I'm just gonna compress it, distort it a bit, and EQ a lot to make sure it sounds good. So first I have the drum bass. It's gonna glue. Of course here I clip a bit, but this is how it would sound if I gain stage. I have also Oxford inflator, a little bit of saturation. Here the decapitator to get the analog grain, but you see it's very slight, very low dry wet, and almost no drive. Then the overdrive, and then I compress with the OTT. Then EQing. I had a bit too much of that resonancy, especially with the reverb, and then just a clipper to make sure I don't have like peaks. And then this is just for the arrangement. So this is how it sounds, and this is my kick bass. To accompany that kick bass, you see that I have some noises, but I'm also gonna add some kind of grains and also other kind of ambience sounds. So I have this polyrhythm ambience. I'm also using the snake sequencer. I did the same, like random notes, random gates, where I use only one note, but it's not tonal, so whatever. It's just a perk. And then I'm using random gates, random velocities. I'm creating an echo, and then I'm just making sure I'm having an airy reverb, plate reverb. I can use Endless Mile, or I can use this Hallucination preset from Ableton. Again, I'm just cutting the attack to only get the grainy part, and then I EQ and sidechain. I have this ambience noise, so I took a random at loop and then putting lots of reverb. Then just using the grain delay, and you get some great textures. Finally, I have this grain. So I'm using one note and I put it 15 steps. This way it's going to be a polyrhythm, and it's not going to be like a multiple of 2. It's going to play randomly along the track. And then again, just using like a random synth start, but then I'm creating something interesting because I'm transpose it up. I use just the transient, and I'm using the grain delay to create this texture. Also the shifter. This one will be also working if I want something like this. And then some reverb also. So it's all kind of the same method. And then I just make sure as sidechain I have no lows on the group. And that's how I did those ambient sounds. Next up, I have my leads. So for the leads, I have 2 main elements. I have first the blips. So this is those kind of blips. And I have these 2. The first blip is made in Serum. This is just a sine wave that I play with a little bit of attack. I don't want this attack, I want something smooth, so that's why I put like a few milliseconds. And then I just add a bit of character and harmonics with the amp, but then it's just all this reverb that make it smooth and interesting. Also I'm using the shifter. I feel like I get something more dark and more interesting if it's slightly detuned, and then just sidechain and EQing because just want something dark, dull, a kind of bleep sound like this. Next, I have this other bleep sound. I'm using the same patch. Basically, it's just a sine wave. This one is with even more slow attack. I have a phaser also to get a slight more movement. And same thing, I'm using distortion to get more harmonics, the amp, and then I'm creating this vibing sound with a long decay reverb. And then it's just the same thing, shifter, EQ, sidechain, until I properly have the sound. Sometimes it can resonate. That's why I have lots of EQs, because I went back and forth to match the volume with the rest of the track. But here, basically, I just want that sine wave, not too much because those frequency areas can be very resonating. And I also want slight harmonics, but not too much, otherwise it will sound a bit too much crispy or open. That's how I did those bleeps. Next, I have the piano leads. So this one is heavily inspired, of course, from one of the tracks on Meteor Rhythms. So here I'm using this piano lo-fi preset. I think it's a free one from In The Mix, which is an amazing channel, by the way. So you have lots of effects. Basically, it's just a gentle sine wave with a bit of attack and that movement with that low cut filter. Just adding more reverb, of course. And just a bit of character also with the amp and some clarity. And then I'm just choosing random notes with a good rhythm on the scale, which is E Phrygian. It's also this Phrygian scale that adds something interesting with that F note. So I'm just trying different melodies. You can see I'm just using the same principle each time, but I'm changing those very few notes. I'm actually making a call and answer with that one. So I have the piano here, which is pretty clear. And then I'm using a second patch, but with a different filter. This one is a low 24, so it's a bit more muffled compared to this one. Also managing a bit those frequencies with some dynamic EQs, because as I said, especially here, this can be resonating, and sometimes I was just going back and forth on the channel volumes, but it can be really balanced if I don't use these dynamic EQs. And what I can do to create something more interesting is using reverse to kind of anticipate the starting point for those piano notes. So I just took one note, this one. I record this and then I put it to audio and I reverse it, and you can get this kind of reverse things. And I can create also a little sweep like this. I can also use it here so that it starts again. So this is the kind of little details that can enhance your track pretty easily. Next, I have this bass drop, which is again a sine wave. I don't want too much harmonics, so that's why I'm using sine waves. It's a way to have a more gentle sound. But here I'm just adding up still some harmonics, but not too much, so that it sounds like a square or whatever. So here it's just to accompany the drop, but this drop is pretty calm, and I have just a few notes in the scale. I just play here this sine wave with a gentle attack, some distortion, long reverb of course, and then sidechain and EQ, and that's pretty much it for the lead sounds. So next I have my drums. Not too much drums actually, it's more again some airy vibe and background for the track. Especially the bigger or main drums are the open hat or like the closed hi-hat with this straightforward kind of rhythm. So here I'm just choosing this sharp hat sound, and adding a plate reverb on it. I have another one which is a bit more expressive with that rhythm. But again, it's the same with a little delay, plate reverb, sidechain, and EQ, and controlling also the resonances with that sus2. I have a shaker here that comes slowly here in the second part of the track. So straight shaker loop from the library here. And I have this drop hi-hat again with the closed hi-hat pattern, plate reverb, EQ, sidechain, slight amp, the usual stuff. And then I just group it and make sure everything is okay. Adding also a slight reverb on top of it so that it adds a bit more room, a bit more wideness, controlling also the transient. And that's pretty much it for my drums. Next, I have some effects. So I have quite a lot of effects that kind of fill up the frequency spectrum and the background. There's a few effects that you can hear in most of his tracks. I'm going to show you how I did that. Especially this kind of effect with the flanger or the phaser actually. You can hear those kind of sound in Vol de Nuit. So I just took noise or sweep or whatever, this kind of sound. And you create with a phaser, with a rate of 2, this kind of effect where the phase is shifting. I don't want all that high. I want to put it a bit in the background, actually all the thing in the background. I don't want it to be very dry, but I don't put too much decay, otherwise this is completely out of control. It's just to put it in the background. And then I'm just taming basically the frequencies so that it's not too harsh. I can also create a sweep, reversing this white noise. And then using different ones, I can pitch it up, down to create different ones, but still keeping the same kind of style. So this is the first effect. I have another one here. So here I'm just choosing some vocals, and instantly you can create interesting texture with the grain delay. And then you make it very wide. And in the background with some delay and reverb. I have also sidechain here, of course. You have then this type of effect. This one is more grainy stuff. So to do that, I took, I think it's just metallic kind of Foley sound to get those kind of texture and FM sounds, FM frequencies, and then just same thing, you use the grain delay to create something more dissonant, more dark, more wide. And then I use the delay and reverb to just make it lively and make it in the background. Also the filter delay is pretty effective for that. I then have those resonating frequencies, so for that I just use a synth, so whatever the synth, then you just saturate it a lot, and then you create like virtually that kind of resonancy. So in one of his tracks, it was more in that frequency area, so that's why I chose that. And then you just create that peak, and you can also use a clipper to make it clip like this if you like this effect. And you can create those kind of atmos with this kind of resonative frequencies. And then final effect here, just more perk stuff, Foley sounds. So same thing, grain delay, delay reverb, EQ, sidechain on the group. And that's pretty much it for my effects. Next, I just have this clap leitmotif for a few drops here. I'm just using arpeggiator to create that effect, a few bunch of MIDI notes, 909 clap, delay reverb, and sidechain EQ. So basically, if you want something dark, put a long reverb. You want something more lively, you put a delay. You want something more dark, you can use the crane delay or this type of stuff, the shifter, if you want something off-key. And that's basically how you make those kind of dark effect sounds and texture. And finally, for my breakdown, I'm using a vocal. I did it myself with my voice, so without all the effects.
Entre deux silences, tout s'éloigne, tout se rapproche.
I'm just saying some random stuff, deep stuff in French.
Entre deux silences, tout s'éloigne, tout se rapproche.
And I make it more deep, more interesting. First, I pitch it down.
Entre deux silences.
So it's more dark, I prefer. Then I'm using a de-esser to make it for sibilances. I'm using a delay, ear effect. I'm using ear and echo. Just a bunch of different effect racks from Sound Toys, especially for the vocals. So I have 2 dirt echoes. I have a big reverb.
Entre deux silences. Entre deux silences. Entre deux silences.
So this one is a vocal preset from Valhalla Vintage, and then sidechain EQ. And that's how I made this. And then I just chop it up to use it again
Tout s'éloigne.
with a bit more reverb after the drop. And also pitch it down again. And that's it, guys, for this track. So I hope you like it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I see you in the next one. Ciao, guys.